Netflix has Love, Death and Robots. Disney have Star Wars have Visions. Basically, Visions like Love, Death and Robot, short animations put together to create a season of a show. Now, season 1 was pretty epic. I loved the duel. The duel for me in terms of style, story, and that epic final fight scene was pretty cool. I absolutely enjoyed it, and there was some episodes that hit and others missed. Now, unlike Love, Death and Robots, Vision is supposed to be short animations, but they're all supposed to work around the Star Wars universe. You can do anything you want, but keep it a Star Wars story. So here's what we're going to do. Instead of me ranking the best to the worst or the worst to the best, I'm going to divide them into 3 categories. So we have visually stunning, flawless episodes, visually. Then we have good stories. Then we have dumpster, the pit, garbage, and we have a garbage bin where we can throw all those episodes that did not work. Now let's start with visually stunning episodes. At number 1, this is Our Song. Our Song is I think the second last or last episode, and it's a very beautiful episode. The colors pop, the models look unique, the expression, it feels like something that was needed. I know it's clear that it was 3D, but they rendered it differently. It's unlike anything that you've seen before. It's a Star Wars movie, but the characters don't look like anything that I've seen. They mix up some styles at the end, but generally in terms of look, the colors pop, the concept arts look beautiful, the character design is different, and generally the palette of this particular episode feels good to look at. Let me put it that way. It feels good to look at, and you can actually just shut it off and just watch because it just looks so good. I enjoyed the visual aspect of Owl's Song. It's called Owl's Song. The other one is In the Stars. They used claymation, the style of claymation, and I was shocked by how, you can use claymation, but when you're using claymation, you zoom in into the character, so we see their expressions, we see what's happening to them. But they go to this place, and they have it's really a complicated scene basically in terms of visuals. There are a lot of things that are happening in the background. There are larger things than the characters themselves, and they create for a very interesting view. Plus the language, the visual language in terms of bad and good, it's very well balanced. But for me, the claymation is the idea that you can move away from focusing, because if you've seen any claymation movies, they tend to focus a lot on the characters, because working on the environment and outside the characters can be very, very difficult. And there are some scenes where you have some things that are bigger than the characters, and some things actually happen and you go like, how the hell did they animate that? That must have been problematic, because again, when it comes to claymation, animating water can be very, very difficult, and they actually did it very, 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 very well. It's stunning to look at. The colors, differentiation between the good and the bad is very, very well done, and generally it's a very beautiful palette. Dark but beautiful. The other one is Sith. Sith is basically Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse, trying to emulate that style. You can tell that they're 3D models, but they painted over them. Now they literally painted because the movie is about, it has something to do with color and painting, but how they're able to play around with it and push it, that for me was pretty awesome. Now I did not like the main character. The main character's model, apart from one hand, was pretty generic 3D character. She felt like she was just a 3D character that the artist felt lazy to paint, but the environments and even the villain looked way better than the main character. The environments look and act in a distinct way. Let me just put it that way, because when she leaves a particular place and goes to a different place, you can tell that the visuals are pretty different. Now the visuals also play a part into the story, so that is also welcomed. And it's actually, if you love art and you love color, you will enjoy this episode because of just how they decided to render and shade most of the characters. So Sith was a pretty beautiful, and it's the most distinct thing about the trailer, and they pushed it a lot in the trailer. You would think that all the episodes were designed to go to look like Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse because of that one animated segment. So apart from Sith, the other one is Screecher's Reach. I love how they did 2D small characters, and then they zoomed away, so you have the characters looking really small, and then they flatten it. At the beginning, that's like the first 2 acts of this short story. The characters feel flat, and the character models look, the character model and design, because it's 2D, but the character design is pretty interesting. They look the way they're supposed to look, and the expressions, and just how they are able to blend the environment and just, I would call it the flattening effect, whereby the characters feel like they're in a 2D plane. That was pretty interesting. At the end, they decided to do something, and I was like, this is either laziness or poor directional decision, because there are things that happen at the end. You go like, either they ran out of time or they did not have a clear idea on what they wanted to do with a particular character. And they also did something interesting during the opening, where they just pan up and you can see different things happen, and also an interesting use of silhouettes. Let me just put it that way. But it was visually a very enjoyable episode 1, because of course it was 2D. Apart from everything else I've said, it was pure 2D, and it was really well done. So next we move on to the story, and this one of course was, and this is the thing, you see, Vision is supposed to be very experimental with the story and bringing new ideas, or experimental with the look. So with the story, there were very few good stories, unfortunately. Let me just put it, if you're going for the story, you'll find very few good stories. Now the first one was Spy Dancer. Spy Dancer, it may not look very visually stunning because I did not like the large strokes that they used on their characters, but generally the story, it feels, I think it was made by a French studio, because there's a heavy French accent within the episode. But just in terms of what they were able to do with the story, I found it very interesting, because if you were to go to the last scene and just expand on what had been revealed, that is a whole movie in itself. They finish it in such a way that it can make its own movie. The story in itself is a mother and son story. Very, very well done. They don't show too much of some things, and then they make you understand why some droids are feared in the Star Wars galaxy, and it actually makes sense for them to be feared. And then they introduce just something different about the Star Wars universe, something different about Star Troopers. They just did something different about that. They did something different with other characters, but in general, as a package, that was a very well done story. Very well done story, a very, very interesting conclusion. I would look into Star Wars and go like, you can actually create something outside that ending. Outside that reveal, you can create a totally different Star Wars series or Star Wars movie. Yes, it's one of the most intense episodes in the series, in terms of action and suspense. The other one is Au's Song. As I said, it's a very beautiful episode. Now, they got everything right, the beginning, the middle, because it's more or less a silent film. There's a lot. The main character doesn't talk a lot. And so it's also beautiful just to follow the character along, and it's a it's a stunning episode visually. Now the story, they got the first act, the second act very, very well. The ending for me was lazy, because they decided to take it the Star Wars direction, and it was pretty obvious. When something happened, you go like, they're going to do that to this particular character, and you go like, I saw that in another particular, and I saw that in another particular episode. Why do they keep doing this? And I'm like, I don't actually like this, because the final part has a lot of messaging in it. It's basically a message. They're trying to send a message, unless they plan to bring all these characters together, whatever is happening to these particular characters, unless they are planning to bring them in maybe season 3 together. In this particular season, what they're doing with those characters is it's dodgy, it's lazy. Let's just be honest, it's pretty lazy. You go like, so we've done this with the character, how do we end it? Let this character do this with the character so that this can happen. But before we go to that ending, we had a very good story. Actually, it's more of a father and daughter story. Very, very interesting, very intriguing, very charming, visually and story-wise. But then you have to go through this generic approach to an ending. Anyway, that was basically our song. Enjoyable, but a very poor ending. Now, the other episode that I loved for its simplicity and its straightforwardness is Journey to the Dark Head. It's anime, and they don't, the way anime like to respect people's sensibility when it comes to action, so they don't try to waste your time with, I don't know who did what. They introduce you to the bad guy, they introduce you to the conflict in the main character's head, and then they throw you into the action. That's what they did. It's a very basic story, but they take it in a far more interesting place, and they have a far more interesting ending. For me, this was, in terms of story, the most fulfilling episode, because of the action, because of how simple they decided to keep the story, and how clear they were with the story, and where they took it at the end. The end was more satisfying than any other episode, because they took it in a totally different direction. And they obviously have the over-the-top bad guy, who is it's anime basically, and it's done very, very well. It's beautiful, not as beautiful as the other episode that I mentioned, but it's beautiful in its own way because they use the anime style, and it was pretty enjoyable. I had a great time with this particular episode. This is one of the few episodes that I watched twice because of just how simple it was in terms of story and fulfilling it was in terms of just taking you from point A to point Z and then telling you that, yeah, this is still a Star Wars movie, a Star Wars episode. So yeah, that's Journey to the Dark Head. Now, let's see which episodes belong in the dump side. Let's see which episode belong in the garbage. By that I mean episodes that were like, what am I watching? Episodes that were like, yeah, we are woke, it's feminist, we don't care about what you think. Episodes that were big on what the critical drinker would call the message. Now, there's some episodes, most of the episodes in this show were all about the message. Actually, all of them had a message, and it was woke. It was like that moment someone puts their foot down and goes like, we are woke and we are going to do it whether you like it or not, whether we have good stories or not, whether we have good visuals or not, we are going to make you eat it. So these are the episodes that actually used that formula, and these are the episodes that crippled Visions season 2. At number one is a episode called The Pit. Now this was a weird episode. So some guys have been picked by the troopers, then they've been made to dig, and when they dig they find crystals, and so when they find the crystals, obviously that area is going to turn into a city because they have a natural resource, and at some point they get to the end and then they find themselves trapped within that hole, and now they have to do something so that they can come to be rescued. It was so basic and so jarring that I was like, wait, what am I watching? It's supposed to be experimental, yes, it's not supposed to be lazy. What I saw was lazy, basically going into it and going like, oh wait, so what are we going to do about this? We're going to have a guy go, and then people are going to say no, and then this kid who, I'm asking myself, how the hell did you find a kid in a hole digging for the Republic? And the Republic is cruel, and they're able to do some of the things that I did. But if you look at the kids within that environment, if you look at the people within that environment, they look like cool people. They look like people who've not been suffering. I'm sorry, apart from the uniform, they look like healthy, people who've been taking care of themselves, but they're digging here and they're trapped in this particular space and they have to go up, and then there are animals that are introduced, and I'm like, are you going to do something with those animals? They do something small with it, and I'm like, okay, so do what you want to do with these particular animals. There's something you can do more with these small things that you've introduced, and they don't do anything with them. The ending is, you go like, okay, most definitely this was a filler episode. They did not know what to do with this, so they thought that they paid for it, so they just need to put it in. They didn't care. It felt like a filler episode. It did not go anywhere. It did not make sense. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. What's the wokeness in this? There's a lot of African American or African or dark-skinned people within this particular episode, and they try to make that obvious because they do that pose thing whereby it feels a scene. It's animated, yes, but a scene feels like it has been staged. So it's like, Houston, let's draw these people there. Is there something happening on this scene? There's nothing happening, but let's just put cultural appropriation and a lot of dark-skinned people here so that we can show people that we have dark-skinned people in the Star Wars universe. Not that we didn't think that they had dark-skinned people in Star Wars, but yeah, they felt that in this particular show, they needed to show us that they have dark-skinned people within this universe, despite the fact that we already know that. The other one was the Bandit of Golak. At some point, when this began, I thought it was interesting. It's visually pleasing. At some point, I thought that it was designed by AI because it has that jarring look in terms of 3D and character design, and some set pieces actually look like they were AI generated because of just how they looked and how they felt and the texture. But this is basically an Indian version of Star Wars. This is basically Star Wars saying, yo, India, we have Star Wars, we have Indians in the Star Wars universe, so come subscribe to Disney Plus. We have all the Indian flavors that you need. There's that Indian language within this particular universe, even with the accent, with the outfits. Now, the problem with me with this particular episode was the animation. Yeah, it's very poor 3D animation. Now, I know they may have gone for that. I know this is what maybe they went for because it's an Indian movie and they wanted also that Indian take on how they make their own movies. But in this particular case, it did not work for me. The animation was Uncanny Valley. It's supposed to be a 3D animated movie, but there was just something off about the animation itself. Yes, it's very beautiful. not as beautiful as the other, not as beautiful or as experimental as the other animated episodes, but it had its own feel. But I just couldn't get my head wrapped around how the animated, especially 3D, just felt off. Now when you get to the ending, there is a particular fight scene that I know that they were going for what the extravagance in terms of action, over the top action fight scene that Indian movies have, but in this one, I don't know if it was the editing, I don't know if it was the lack of a sound design. It just felt off. I did not know what was happening on the scene until two people actually kicked each other. There was just so many things happening, and you don't know if it's a fight scene. You don't know if it's you don't know what's happening. You know that there's something happening because there's a lot of dust. There are people flying everywhere. It's in slow mo. It feels like it was directed by Zack Snyder, but you don't know what's happening. So for me, that was a problem. I couldn't wrap my head around the animation in itself. The animation style, as I said, the look felt like it was developed by AI. Now, with the ending, again, it's the same ending with Our Song and Screecher's Reach. It's the same ending as Our Song, and these are the same ending. I don't know what, maybe they intend to do something with these particular endings, but it ends in the same way. I think there was even another episode in season 1 that had the same ending, and for me that's lazy writing. It's pretty lazy. There's some things that happen during a chase scene, you're like, what? Okay, you're like, just okay, there's a part that it feels like Snowpiercer in a way, but it just didn't feel, it just felt off. The other one is Creatures Reach. I know I said that it was a beautiful episode, but it did not make sense. I think this was, I mean, it's literally like a character going like, yo, let's escape this. I feel that there's more to me than this. Then she gets an opportunity to be something, and she embraces it and leaves her baby brothers and a bigger brother just alone. It's like she needed to get away from them. Basically, that's how it felt, and it felt like a poorly written story. It didn't have anything experimental about it. Let me just put it that way. In terms of concept, visually it was stunning, but not different. Visually, the 2D animation and the character designs were pretty cool, but there was nothing different with the story. There was nothing different with the concept in itself. It just felt like, yo, we have 2D, we can... Everything in this episode was based on that ending. Yeah, something happening to the character. Everything else lacked meaning. Everything around that lacked meaning until they got to that last point where a character has to now live with a different character. It's like they said, we have this ending, how do we get here? So she does this, she does this, she does this, she does this. What are we trying to communicate? As I said, wokeness. What are we trying to communicate? Let's communicate it using this, and then let's communicate it using this. So the message is pretty loud, but it lacks a soul, it lacks value, it lacks the experimentation of a Star Wars vision property. Yes, so that is Screecher's Reach. The other one is Synth, again very strong on the message, extremely strong on the message. It's a beautiful episode, but again it's just subliminal messaging and a lot of on-your-face messaging about girl power, about feminism. There's nothing wrong with that, but if you can see it, there's a problem. I think even the villain was far more interesting according to me than the main character. The main character lacked a soul. You know, the droid was more interesting than the main character. The droid was more interesting than the episode in itself. Apart, if you were to strip away the visual language of that episode, that episode would lack any value because it's just so today. It's so what is happening today that even in the next 5 years it's going to be pointless. It's going to be like, oh, we used to do that in the early 2020s. You know, it's one of those. It will not age well. It will not age very well, basically. Let me just put it that way. The other one is In the Stars. In the Stars, visually pleasing, but of course they had a message, and of course it was going to be feminism. It was going to be all about girls. There are no boys in that particular universe except Star Troopers. It's just the villain is a woman, the good guys are women, the stars are women. The child is beautifully designed. It's a very fantastic looking character. But the voice or whoever wrote some lines are so annoying. Oh my goodness. It's just, I think they went for that voice and particular statement so that they can make much and then install a voice something to be able to say something. But that child was for me the most annoying part of the whole Vision series, because it just, there was a contrast between the character that you are looking at and the voice of the character. Yes, it's childish, but it's annoying. Let me just put it that way. It's pretty annoying. And with also the feminist messaging, for me, I felt like, yes, I'm enjoying what I'm looking at, but if I was to mute it, it would be more interesting. It's more interested muting than actually listening to what they have to say, basically. I will not take it away from the animators. It's a very beautiful, the people who came up with the concept art, the visual language, beautiful, but the voice acting and the script, 100% garbage. It belongs in the dump. It belongs in a dump site. Now, for me, the worst, and I think kids will enjoy this, but for me, as a person who enjoys movies and stories, this for me was like, it was another filler. It was more of, we need something to add on to this to make the season feel longer, because if you've seen Phantom Menace, you've seen this particular episode. There's a particular part, because it's a race, and let me just let you know how generic this is. In a race, what usually happens is the underdog, and there is the people who are probably going to win. But something happens. Their crafts look different. The crafts of the underdog don't look like, they look like crafts for an underdog. And then again, women, girls. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I'm not saying that you don't deserve to have content created for you if you're a woman. I'm just saying that if you have to do it in such a way that I am so intrigued by it that I don't see it. The main character in Spy Dancer is a woman. The other main character there's a slightly smaller character in that particular episode who is also a woman, but you don't feel it because of just how the story has been constructed. The story pulls you in and lets you and totally envelops you and immerses you into its world, that you forget that you're watching what? You're watching women. It moves from watching women to watching really good characters. This particular Your Mother character did not do that. It did not give you that. It gave you that, look, I'm a girl, and look, this is my awkward mom, and look, bras everywhere, and look, we are racing those. It's supposed to be a family race, but it seems like every single family is a single mother family within that particular universe. You get, it's done by the people who did Chicken Run. I understand the tone that they go for, and they tried to bring that tone into this episode, but the story in itself did not gel well. There was nothing unique about the story. There was nothing unique about the concept of what they were going for. Yes, the characters look well. Yes, the characters remind you of Chicken Run. Yes, it feels like it was brought to you by the same people who brought Chicken Run, but whatever was presented did not work because of the messaging and just the poor story, the poor concept, and the pathetic script. I mean, let me just make you understand how bad this was. It reaches a point when a character says something, you know what's going to happen, you know who's going to lose, you know who's going to win, you know after winning what the character is going to say. And guess what? Whatever you think happens the exact way that you expect it to happen. They don't surprise you, they don't take you on a different ride, they don't reveal anything new, they just do exactly what you thought was going to happen. So basically that's it. That's Star Wars Vision Season 2. I enjoyed some episodes. If this is not meant for boys, this is a female thing. It's clear from the word go. Yeah, if you want to show your kids, show them. If you want to show your boys, show them for the visual style and generally the animation if they're interested in art. So basically that's it. That is Visions Season 2. If I was to give it like out of 5, I would give it 2 out of 5. Just for the visuals. Everything else it's mediocre. It falls into the same pit that Love, Death and Robots Season 2 fell into, where something works and then you decide to use whatever has worked and start injecting your own motives, your own ideas. You want to inject messaging into it. You want to tell people how they're supposed to live within something that was already good, and so you end up devaluing the original product. So I hope if they are going to do Season 3, I hope they decide to do something different with it. But whatever they did with Season 2 doesn't work. From a visual perspective, from experimentation in terms of visuals, this was pretty good. That's why I'm giving it a 2. From a storytelling point, from a clean Star Wars story where there is no, where you can actually just watch a Star Wars property and enjoy, no, you don't get that. You miss the 3 points. So basically that's it. Thank you for watching. and I will subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.